So, how do we really fight poverty? For decades, the main focus has been on giving people resources, right? But what if a huge part of a puzzle is something you can't just hand over? Today, we're diving into this really delicate but powerful relationship between what people hope for and the actual chances they get to make those hopes a reality.
I mean, the idea is so appealing, isn't it? That just by boosting someone's aspirations, you could unlock their potential. And there's research that shows this stuff works. Programs that use role models or help people set goals, they can lead to real improvements in education, jobs, and business. It's a really optimistic and powerful thought.
Okay, but here's the twist. This is the critical tension we're digging into today. What happens when you inspire someone to dream bigger, but the world around them offers zero path to actually get there? Well, it turns out that raising hope without providing real opportunity can seriously backfire, sometimes pretty dramatically.
To really get why, we need to pull apart two ideas that have, for a long time, been treated separately. See, poverty interventions usually focused on one or the other. Either the internal stuff, like low aspirations, or the external barriers, like a lack of money. But they rarely looked at both at the same time.
So let's break this down. On one side, you've got aspirations. That's that internal fire, right? The desire for a better job, more education, a different life, and it's totally shaped by what you see around you. Then, on the other side, you have opportunities. This is the external reality, the jobs that actually exist, the schools you can get into, the support you have. It's the structural stuff.
So how do these two forces, our inner aspirations and our outer opportunities, actually play off each other? Well, a framework from the World Bank gives us this fantastic map for understanding the four very different outcomes that can happen when you combine them.
Okay, here's the map. It's a simple 2x2 grid, but it's incredibly powerful. Along the bottom, you have aspirations, going from low to high. And up the side, you have opportunities, also going from low to high. Where these two things meet creates four different zones, and each one tells a completely different story. Let's walk through them.
First up, the bottom left corner. This is when both aspirations and opportunities are low, and this is what we call the classic poverty trap. A lack of resources and a lack of hope just feed each other, creating this vicious cycle that is just so incredibly hard to break out of.
Now let's move up to the top left. This is the aspiration trap, and this is a really fascinating and kind of tragic situation. Here, opportunities do exist. There are good schools, decent jobs, but people's aspirations are just too low to even reach for them. The potential is there, but it just sits there, completely unused.
So why on earth does this happen? Well, it boils down to a few key things. First, people might simply not know that these better options are even out there. Second, they might lack the self-confidence, maybe because of social norms or stereotypes telling them they can't. And third, and this one's interesting, sometimes it's a conscious choice to avoid being isolated from their community if they were to break the mold.
All right, now for the bottom right corner. And this might be the most dangerous of all. Frustration. This is what you get when aspirations are high, but opportunities are rock bottom. You've gotten someone all fired up to dream big, but you've given them no ladder to even begin the climb.
Let's look at a real-world example of how this plays out, because it's pretty stark. In the Philippines, there was this well-intentioned program that gave aspirational training to small business owners. They were really encouraged to set much, much higher savings goals for their businesses.
So what happened? Well, these entrepreneurs set these huge new goals for themselves, but on average, they only managed to achieve about 5% of them. Just 5%! The gap between their new dreams and their reality was absolutely massive.
And this wasn't just a harmless disappointment. The failure led to real, measurable frustration. In fact, the entrepreneurs started borrowing and investing less in their businesses. They even reported feeling like they had less control over their own lives. The intervention actually made things worse.
And all of this brings us to our last corner, the top right. This is the goal. This is what we call alignment. It's that state where high aspirations are perfectly matched by high opportunities. This is the sweet spot, where motivation meets possibility and people can actually truly reach their potential.
Okay, so if alignment is the destination, how do we get there? Let's check out some programs that have figured out how to tackle both sides of this equation at once.
One really effective way to do this is something called a Cash Plus program. It's basically a two-pronged attack. First, you provide the opportunity, the cash, through a transfer or a loan. Then you provide the plus, that's the inspiration, by connecting people with role models and mentors who can show them what's possible.
And this next example just brilliantly shows the power of that plus. So in India, a policy experiment reserved some village leadership spots for women. Now, this didn't just change local politics, it totally changed what young girls in those villages saw as possible for their own futures.
The results were just stunning. Having these female leaders to look up to completely erased the gender gap in career dreams between teenage boys and girls. And it wasn't just talk. It translated into real-world results, closing the gap in how much education they got, too.
And inspiration doesn't have to be a politician. In another fascinating study, students in Uganda watched the movie Queen of Kadwe. You know, the true story about a girl from the slums who becomes a world chess champion?
Get this, just watching that one movie had a measurable effect. It actually boosted the students' math scores and significantly cut their chances of failing a math test. A little dose of inspiration from a story they could relate to led directly to better grades. How cool is that?
So, what all this really shows us is that helping people climb out of poverty isn't as simple as just handing them money or giving them a pep talk. It is a really careful, delicate balancing act.
So if you take just one thing away today, let it be this. Real, lasting progress happens right at that intersection of aspiration and opportunity. If you focus on one without the other, you risk creating traps of missed potential or even worse, bitter frustration. True empowerment? It requires both the dream and the doorway.
And that leaves us with one last thought. You know, this framework, it isn't just for economists and policymakers. Think about your own world, your job, your community, maybe even your own family. Where do you see big dreams with no clear path forward? Or where do you see great opportunities that no one seems to be reaching for? Understanding this balance, that's the first step to actually being able to change it.